Well, for whatever reason, the show didn't play my intro. That's great. Okay. Sometimes StreamYard is crazy. We are live. Can I get a confirmation in the chat? We are live. Should be. StreamYard is this is what I don't like about StreamYard. I don't want to just talk randomly here because this is a terrible start to the show, but whatever. It'll like if somebody else goes and changes something elsewhere, it impacts my stream. I'm going to double check, make sure we're good to go. Okay, yeah, we're live. Cool. Sorry about that. Again, normally my intro plays and it didn't play this time, so that screwed me up. All right. Welcome into Mississippi State Live here on the Voice of College Football. Hail State Sven already in the chat. Shout out. And we also, earlier, we had Micah in giving us a can't wait. He was locked and ready to go. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We're going to be talking about Mississippi State's transfer class because it looks like that's pretty much set. So why don't we grade it? Why don't we talk about how State has done to this point with their portal class? That's going to be the topic for today's episode, or I guess tonight's episode. Trey Clark, shout out to you. Love seeing you guys joining in. For those of you who are tuning in, if you could leave me a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and have the notifications turned on so you do know we do go live. And, hey, tell all the Bulldog fans out there about what we're doing here. From Jonesy, do you have any idea what place the cheer team got last week in Orlando? I do not, because I have not kept up with what MSU cheer has been doing. Jeff Lebby fired yet? He's not fired yet. He's going to get this year. We'll see how that goes. We're off to a great start already. This episode, like I said, when something changes on me last second, it just screws my brain. So like that, the intro starting weird, already messed with me. But we're gonna roll with it. We got a good little crowd in here tonight. I love chatting with you guys. Yeah, we're gonna talk about State's portal class. But before that, I guess just real quick, hitting the big news. And I know some of you have already seen it because the video was up on the channel. State, obviously, as you all know, did not win the Jordan Seaton sweepstakes. He's off to LSU. I've got a full reaction video. I went 38 plus minutes. Talking about losing Jordan Seaton and where State might turn in the portal, which appears they're not going to be turning anywhere in the portal. We talked a little bit about the transfer class of offensive line, where they stand, some of the decision-making through how they've handled things throughout. So we'll if you're looking for my deep thoughts on Jordan Seaton and how that all played out, I've got, again, a full video over there on the channel you guys can check out. Obviously, after the stream, I'd love for you guys to go check that video out. But look, the quick summation of my thoughts on that all is, at the end of the day, losing Jordan Seaton in and of itself is not a surprise or not a knock on State, right? State had the money to get in the game financially. That's all fine and well. But as I'm going to plug my laptop in, I forgot to do that ahead of time. The reality of the situation is, it does take more than just money. And right now, LSU or Miami and Oregon, for that matter, have a whole lot more to sell to a player like Jordan Seaton. And the biggest being that you can come here and compete for a championship. And I know there's some rumored numbers talking about, $7-8 million for Seaton. I don't know if LSU actually went that high or not. I think Pete Nako said it was between the $4 and $5 million range, which I think Mississippi State absolutely would have paid. If that's the accurate number. But the reality is Seaton going to LSU is sort of like that final piece they needed offensively, that now that they get that, that's a team that can compete for the SEC. That's a team that can compete to go to the playoff, potentially compete for a championship. I don't know that they're all the way there just yet. Can Sam Leavitt quarterback a national championship team? We'll see. But they've gone out and gotten at least a very talented quarterback in Leavitt, who's a good fit for what they want to do offensively. Ton of receivers, good group of backs, a good tight end. Getting Seaton on that offensive line kind of settles things to where they should at least be solid up front. And obviously Kiffin and Weiss running that offense, they're going to score points. And then defensively, Prince will at defensive end. They got a couple other talented defensive linemen, one out of Clemson, one from Auburn. I think, Whitweek's still there on the defense. I think the back end of their defense, they got some questions, but LSU is going to be really stinking good next year. So it was going to be tough for State to win that battle because you're selling. Are you going to come play for a program that is hoping to take a step forward to like 8-9 wins? Which I think if you had gotten Jordan Seaton, there's a possibility of that. But ultimately, you're talking about, can we get into a bowl game versus a team that, hey, if you come here, you could be the missing piece for us winning a national championship. That's a tough thing to beat. So you understand why State comes up short there. It's not a lack of money. It's not a lack of commitment. They went all in. The concern is more, it felt like that's the only real swing you took, right? And if you had the money to go after Jordan Seaton, why did you not take bigger swings elsewhere when you had more needs? And I talked about this a lot. And again, if you guys check out the full clip, it's not even a clip. I mean, it's basically an episode. It was a podcast is what it was, talking about Jordan Seaton. My big thing is, okay, you had this money. Where's it being spent now? And, I talk a lot about if you had this money set aside and it's not getting used, are you just not maximizing this roster? I mean, I've seen others say that this was not a case where you're talking about this was the money for the roster that wasn't getting used, and it was more this was money because we can get a seed and we're going to find this money. But what I'll always say to that is, well, if you had the ability to get that money, why was the money not being used in the first place? Either way, for me, you had the ability to spend more on this roster clearly, and looks like it's not happening. Spin coming in, 8 wins is delusional. We have no depth on both lines. We'll run all over us like we do since 2 years. When I say 8 wins, I'm talking about like if you added Jordan Seaton, there's a world where Mississippi State, because I think he's that good of a player. I think I said this a lot. I think if you had gotten Jordan Seaton, your offensive line at that point, you would be. I would trust you to figure out the rest, which maybe is a risk because let's be honest, Colorado's had him the last couple of years and they still haven't figured it out up front. But I think State probably still has a greater depth of talent on the offensive line, which I know sounds crazy, but compared to Colorado, I would take State's guys up front than what Colorado has had overall. So I think you add Jordan Seaton to that group with Cannon Boone back, DJ Chester coming in, finding a spot for Blake Steen, Miles McVay, Brandon Snee, LJ Perdome. I think they would have figured it out if you'd gotten Jordan Seaton. And I think you would have had at least a solid offensive line. And then I would trust everything else on that offense to work. That's where you talk about taking that big step forward. Without him, no, that you can still have those same questions about the offensive line. We'll obviously get into that when we talk about the portal class in the episode a little bit later. So, I mean, again, you understand why you didn't win the battle, but the concern is clearly you're not investing quite the same way. Then we need more bodies on both lines. One season can't fix State, but for this money, you could have gotten 5 solid guys who can fix way more. I just think I think Jordan Seaton plus talking about defense is another discussion. I think Jordan Seaton is a good enough talent that him plus the guys State has with what they've brought in, I think they would have been okay. I'm not saying they would have been dominant up front. I think they would have been okay. And okay within this offense is fine. They haven't gotten okay, but I think okay within this offense, when you got a talent like that at protecting your left side, I trust you figure that out. That's me. You can disagree. Hey, we can all have our own opinions on that. Starting 5, offensive line for 2026. Left tackle, Brandon Snee. Left guard, DJ Chester. Center, Cannon Boone. Right guard, LJ Perdome. Right tackle, Blake Steen. And then Miles McVay is your swing tackle. So he could step in at left or right. That's my thought process there. I'm weirdly more curious about how they fill out guard from a depth standpoint, because I do think at tackle, because you've mostly recruited tackles like Snee, Steen, McVay, Saquon Miles, Jakeem Shumpert, Perkins. I think they've got bodies that make sense at tackle. Who are your guys at guard is more the question. Maybe they move Steen inside. He's played guard in his career. Mostly been a right tackle, but he has played guard before. So maybe they could do that. Back to, I'll start closing out my thoughts on the Seaton thing. My bigger thing is like the money side of it. It feels like you're going without addressing a couple spots you could have addressed. That's my biggest concern. And we're going to talk about that as we're going to go through and grade the entire portal class to this point. But I think there's a few positions. I mean, offensive line being one of them. Like you probably could have gone out and gotten, instead of taking these younger developmental guys that are high ceiling, which could help you down the line, but it's like, will there be a down the line if you don't fix it this year? Could you have gotten a couple guys who could have stepped in and at least given you competition? I'm not even saying for sure coming in and starting. Could you added a couple more guys to compete along the offensive line or defensive line? To Sven's point earlier, D line definitely has a ways to go as well. You could have added maybe a couple more contributors, a couple edge rushers. I think you definitely could have gone after that. It sounds like they were not willing to spend on because they didn't think they were worth the asking price. And it's kind of like, all right, well, who are you getting now? That's the question there. So again, if you want my full breakdown on Jordan Seaton State, there's a video on the channel. Lock in, like I said, it's like 38 minutes, but it got a lot. Just going to check back on a couple other comments. We are jealous of Vanderbilt. Things are bad. It's not fun right now. Baseball is kind of going to be the saving grace, but I mean, I don't know how many of y'all follow me on Twitter. I love MSU baseball, and definitely I probably will get more into it this season because of how bad things have been. And I used to follow religiously like everyone else. Eventually, it just football and men's basketball especially took up a bigger place for me. In baseball, I kind of followed more casually. Like once the postseason hits, I'm locked in. But and I keep up with how it's not like I don't follow the team throughout the season. I keep up with how they're doing, and I'm checking scores and all that. But I don't plan my day around watching MSU baseball in the way that a lot of state fans do. And because of that, it's like, well, this is a bad year for that to be me because football is what it is. Men's basketball disaster. Look, the women's team is having some success. I mean, they got the big win over Kentucky that's night, but you also can kind of see they're still – Sam's good for one of those games a year. They're probably still kind of a middle-of-the-pack SEC team. But, I mean, look, middle-of-the-pack SEC team goes to the tournament. Maybe they can get a couple wins. We'll see. Jeff Lebby's test comes week 2 at Minnesota. If the Lions get crushed in his last game, it's his last game to coach at State. I don't think he'd get fired at Minnesota. They got a bye week a couple weeks later. Maybe they would go to that point. I could also see them wanting to ride out the season. You kind of in this era with the way kids can do the whole red shirt rule. I mean, it's a way, it's a little sleazy if you're going to fire the coach, but at the same time, the players can leave whenever they want. So I don't really feel bad for them. Make sure you get 5 games played before you choose to fire a coach, because otherwise all your best players are going to opt out. That's that. Running through, seeing if there's anything else. Man, I really care only about baseball. Hey, Jonesy, I believe losing Luke Work. I understand he's wanted $500,000. We offered 3 to 4, and Missouri jumped all over it. I mean, I definitely think the losses State has along the offensive line are probably being undersold amongst some. And I think I've said it on this show. I value continuity and experience up front a lot. And as much as I know a lot of people will say, well, those guys didn't play well, I still, Luke Work was a sophomore. He could definitely still have taken a step forward. Javen James, I don't think he's starting at Bama, but he's probably going to be their swing tackle, which means he's going to see action. He could have taken another step forward. So you definitely took some losses where, look, how those guys perform at these other schools, if State's offensive line struggles, that's going to be really damning, honestly, when it comes to Phil Lodeholt, Jeff Lebby, and the whole operation. If these guys all go elsewhere and they get it figured out and State still isn't blocking well up front, that might be one of those things that becomes, nail in the coffin. And look, to be fair, and I was having a discussion with a couple friends about this today, and I've definitely talked about this on the show. Part of the reason you're seeing these other schools jump all over that and pay the price they're paying is because there's just so much value for guys who have starting experience in the SEC in the portal. The O-line portal availability is and I'm not calling these players trash, but it is the epitome of one man's trash is another man's treasure. Like, whereas one school looks at it, it's like, dude, you're not that good. We're not paying you X number of dollars. You can go elsewhere. Another school will look at that same player and say, oh, dude, you've started? Cool. Come in. We'll pay whatever. And, like, it's the same. Like, State's doing the same thing with DJ Chester. Like, DJ Chester, I think it's being portrayed as like he was bad at tackle but was outstanding at center. Wasn't great at center either. And now, as I've talked about, at least the LSU side, they think he could be really good as a guard. And I do think if he was truly awful at center, Brian Kelly wouldn't have kept him in there for a full season. I'm not saying he's terrible. And yes, I understand he was all SEC freshman. The freshman teams are a joke. Those really, because it's how many other freshmen were playing center over the course of an entire season in the SEC. It's kind of by default. Like DJ Chester did not live up to expectations at LSU. That doesn't mean he can come in and he's going to suck at Mississippi State. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, I'm glad you get Cannon Boone back because you get to see him play guard, and hopefully he can really meet his maximum potential there. I'm looking forward to see that. Some will hate this take. Mississippi State should run triple option instead of copying offense. The SEC with less talent, switch it up and run an offense to the positions we usually excel. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a hater on that take because I'm fully of the opinion State should do things differently offensively. Now, in a way, you have a coach in Levy that is trying to accomplish that, although it's tougher now when half the league is running this offense. Like, this is not the offense that was taking over the SEC by storm in 2020, 2021. Half the league runs it, so it's not quite the same effect as maybe it once was. I mean, I think the bigger point is State having a guy who can run a system that, in theory, gives you an edge in certain spots. Like, this system is still difficult for teams to defend. And this system, stylistically, some of what they do gives you a chance in games, gives you a chance offensively that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have. But I don't oppose the idea of State doing things differently offensively. But we'll see how it works out though with Levy. But yeah, like for offensive line in the portal, again, it's like teams are going to spend for guys who have experience, and State's taking a risk for sure with the guys they've moved on from. We'll see how that works out. Okay, we're 17 and a half minutes into this thing, but that's fine. We're having a fun conversation. That doesn't bother me. Let's talk about grading State's portal class. And we're going to go position by position. Because portal class is set, essentially. You're not going to see State really add anybody else at this point. They might take a couple more guys later on. Probably for once. Nobody's enrolling for the spring. You might see a couple bodies get added for the summer because you can still add to this at this point. It's just, nobody else is going to hit the portal. But at this point, you're not going in and adding contributors. You're not. No one who's in the portal available at this point is a guy that's an impact player. And in that Jordan Seaton video that I was talking about, I mentioned potential impact guys, one offensive lineman and one defensive lineman. And that was recorded Friday night. It took a few days to get it up. Well, both those guys have committed elsewhere. So like the day after I did the video, the offensive lineman committed to Ole Miss of all places. The defensive lineman who that I was looking at, he's got an eligibility case that they got to figure out. He's not even for sure going to play, but he committed to Baylor. So some of those guys that I was looking at who were kind of the last difference makers available in the portal, they've already gone elsewhere. So you don't have anybody else to take. At this point, you are bringing in this is the portal class you're bringing in. This is the guys you're working with. This is your 2026 roster. Where do I see Womack playing? I'll be interested to see where they put it. I mean, it's going to be either field or boundary safety. That middle safety role, I think, is more suited for a guy like an Isaac Smith that's kind of a box safety. And, sort of you play that middle of the field, but he'll step down to the box, sometimes drop back to deep middle. I think that's Isaac Smith, and I think Kendall Dolby will probably be the backup in that role, I would imagine. I think a lot of people are expecting Dolby to start, and he might, but the position Dolby played at Oklahoma is more similar to the way Isaac Smith plays. So I think they're both going to be in that spot. And then you either get field or boundary. If you're field, you're probably getting more one-on-one coverage against slot receivers. Do you trust Womack doing that year one? Apparently, he's got good coverage skills, got some man coverage ability, could play as a nickel corner, which that field safety for Arnett is more of his nickel type role. If you trust him year one, you're putting him there. If you would rather give him a year or two before you get him to that point, then I think he's playing boundary. I don't think he's starting right away. I could see him starting as by the end of the season, though. But I think you're probably talking about either Marcus Williams or Jordan Gilbert as your starters at the field and boundary spots. And, I don't know skill set wise who would be better for one or the other. Womack is supposed to have a skill set that you could put him in that field safety type role. But I think you might want to give him some time before you get him playing one-on-one coverage against a bunch of SEC slot receivers. Okay, so with the portal class coming in, like I said, you've got that set. The guys you have are the guys you have in terms of who's going to contribute for this team. So anybody else who gets added later, because I'm sure State will probably take a couple guys just as depth pieces, you're not looking at guys who are contributing for year one. So we can basically give an accurate grade for the class. And what I did is I went position by position, and we're going grading A through F on every single spot. And it's relative to the need at the position and relative to what was realistically attainable for you at that given position. It's not necessarily as simple as you get an A if you signed an outstanding player at that spot. Did you fill the need, and did you meet what was acceptable? So like an A would be you went in and added a guy that you either trust, a good player who either is going to fill the role that you needed him to or be a contributor. B is a case of I think you probably did pretty solid. Think a guy can step in and do well, but you also maybe left a little bit to be desired, could have been a little bit better. C to me is you address the need, but it's very questionable. Like you've brought guys in, it could work for you, but you're still leaving a lot up in the air. D would be like maybe you added somebody, but I don't feel like you really addressed the need. And then F is fully a case of you just didn't bring anybody in. I did not give out an F at any position for what it's worth. That F for me was like literally you didn't bring a guy in at that spot. So no, I don't have a single F. Starting with the offensive side of the ball, and we'll start with quarterback. And this is where I talk about grading be a relative to this. State brings in 2 transfers, A.J. Swan, Jaden Rashada. You knew they had to get a quarterback. That was a thing coming into this because, Camario is your guy, both for this year and for the future. Outside of him, who's the only other scholarship quarterback on the roster? It's Brody McWhorter as a true freshman. And a true freshman that's a guy you probably want to sit and develop a few years. A guy that, look, frankly, whether or not it's going to be questionable whether or not he even really plays at State. And I'm not saying that's not the kid. It's just he's coming in the year after Camario. But you needed to get somebody else because you didn't want to have to turn the reins over to him if something were to happen. If Camario goes down and you need a backup, can you go to somebody else? And we talked about State's options were going to be limited in that because you can't sell, hey, step in and be a starter this year, which knocks out of the pool a lot of the more experienced players. You also can't really sell like, hey, you got a chance to compete for the job down the line because Camario is still going to be here for the next couple of years. So that also limits who you can bring in at that point from a younger standpoint. So you had a limited pool, especially, and then you wanted to get somebody who had some experience. So look, you get A.J. Swan, right? Guy who has SEC starting experience at his best, has been a solid quarterback. What's up, Micah, in the chat? Got some starting SEC experience, has been around college football, played a lot of ball. Is he a superstar? No. Is he a guy that you want to have to be leaning on over the course of a season? No. Is he someone that if Camario had to go down for a bit and you had to turn it over to him, would you trust him to go in and give you serviceable football? Yes. Then you go get Jaden Rashada, which was a shock to all of us. None of us saw that happening. But look, it's a guy that does still have a high talent ceiling. To this point, he has not come close to living up to the career. It's not even close. But I do think he's a guy that, because I'm confident State's not having to pay for him, I think the NIL days are kind of done for Rashada at this point. You can just come in and like, look, man, you got some natural ability. Let's see what happens. So Jeff Lebby's given himself options there, a backup quarterback. We got the one guy who we think can be the experienced trust him to fill in and do well. And the one guy that's still got some upside that may look, if he comes in this spring and is tearing it up and has a good camp, well, then you'd say, like, all right, we feel good that if Camario goes down, this guy comes in and has some natural ability. Believe Rashada will be second team over Swan. I don't know. Probably not. I would still take Swan just because I think that experience is going to be what wins out. And look, he's been the better quarterback to this point. Swan over Rashada. I just think Rashada is someone that Levy looks at as having a higher upside if we had to make a change for a prolonged starter. Because, like, let's say Camario, God forbid, suffered an injury and we needed somebody to come in and play multiple weeks. Could you then turn it over to Rashada? That's where I see it. I think State addressed this need about as well as they could. Like I said, they were not going to go out and get a high caliber player at quarterback. That just wasn't going to happen because of what was available. I gave him an A. I think you addressed this need as well as I could have expected you to. So I'm giving them an A at the quarterback position for how they judged it. And look, again, this is good. You got 4 scholarship quarterbacks. You can redshirt McWhorter and just let that be. And then Rashada and Swan as your backups to Camario. I think that's a perfectly fine place to be. So I'll give him an A at that. Running back, they obviously didn't take one, so there's no grade there. Did they need to take one? I know that was a big conversation point. I don't think so. I still think Fluff, if he's back fully healthy, if he's the player he was to start last season, I think you're fine. I really do. I'm not going to quit Xavier Gayden yet. There were some concerning things with him with some fumbling, some of his vision and seeing it out there. I also think if they would just put him in the game and run plays where you're just getting him involved in open space, get him out on the edge and where his speed can sort of win, I think that's your best case for him. And I know Levy's preference is I can put a guy in the game and him just execute the offense because he wants to go tempo so much that we don't really want to put a guy in just to run a specific play. But I think that might be how you best have to use Gayden, unless he takes a step forward over the offseason. But look, J.J. Hill, I think, is another physical, grinded-out back who can step in and be a contributor right away as a true freshman. So I think you're fine at running back. I know people have wanted the more explosive type guys, but I think you're okay there. And I trust you've got a group that you can be physical in the run game with, which is the biggest thing I'm looking for. And like I said, Gayden can be that explosive ability. So I'm not worried about running back. I don't think they needed to go out and get one. So I'm fine there with them not having taken a back. But again, that's not going to be a part of the grade because they didn't take one. Wide receiver. You get Marquise Johnson and Zion Reagans, a couple power conference SEC transfers. Johnson out of Missouri, where he was a starter, big play threat for the Tigers throughout his career. And then a player in Zion Reagans who had to start some for Oklahoma back as a true freshman in 2024. Didn't play this last year, but another speedster, another kind of one of those small guys that you put on the outside. And Oklahoma did play him at the outside receiver spot. And ideally, you're just like, hey, man, go run fast, get past the guy in front of you, like that Brennan Thompson type role. 2 schematics, again, we really haven't seen the big playability with Reagans just because he hasn't gotten to be used in that way, but he's got that type of a skill set. Marquise Johnson was a big play threat at Missouri. And I think you did what you needed to. And Johnson's a guy I think is going to step in and be an impact guy. I think he's going to start for you, and I think he's going to have a big year. You could have argued go after a bigger frame guy, but I don't think it was a necessity, especially with some of the guys they have coming in. I think they're probably okay there. I think they feel good about the chance of like a San Francisco McGee taking a step forward to give you some of that. You got a couple young guys who can play that role. I think this was a good group of receivers. I give this an A. I think you did what was necessary here, and you added some quality options, including a guy in Johnson that, again, I think he starts for you and has a really good year. And then Reagans could be a special player within this type of system as well. I like what they did at receiver. Tight end is an interesting one because the tight end position is one that I think a lot of people had circled coming into this portal class. It's like State's got to go out and get some bodies at tight end. They got to get some impact guys at tight end because you're losing your starter in Seydou Traore. You really only have one guy coming back in Sam West that has been a contributor with the other guys leaving the program. Bringing in a lot of freshmen, including Zayon Cotton, who you think can potentially contribute right away. But making some big changes there. So what happens at tight end? You felt like you had to go and get guys. You get Riley Williams, who started his career at Miami, showed some flashes for the Canes, bigger frame guy. Early in his career was more of a pass catcher for the Canes. He's put on some more weight. I mean, he's up around 270 now. Was more of the blocking tight end for Oregon State. Only played 2 games this past season for the Beavers, took his red shirt. You know, he's a guy that I do think still has a lot of ability. He was a highly rated tight end coming out of high school and could step in and be a good player. I do think Sam West has a chance to play well for State, and I think Zayon Cotton may be that true receiving threat that you have at tight end. The numbers is where I think you're probably okay, because I thought they would go after another tight end, but when you look at what they actually have stepping in, they signed like 3 or 4 tight ends in this freshman class, and you're really not going to carry a ton of those guys on the roster. So you're talking about, I think it's 5 or 6 tight ends on the roster as a whole. You're never putting more than 2 on the field at the same time. You're probably okay there. And I do think Williams could be a contributor. Now, I give this a B, because I don't know for sure that you got a guy that is a true impact player, but I do think it's a guy who could perform well for you. And I think this is a position where you probably didn't have to make the same type of moves in the portal that was a lot of fans thought you did. So I go B for the tight end. All right, the one everyone's waiting for, offensive line. Big class, 8 players. DJ Chester comes over from LSU, where he had a lot of starting experience in 2 years with the Tigers. I guess it was 3 years total with the program, but 2 years as a guy who first was a starter at center and then sort of a swing player for them last year. Brandon Snee was a starter at UAB at left tackle. Miles McVay, swing tackle for the Tar Heels last season at UNC, but got a lot of playing experience down the stretch. LJ Perdome saw a little bit of action for Arkansas, mostly played special teams, but a guy that they felt projects as a promising guard moving forward. And then you got guys like Mario Nash, Tyler Miller, Jalen Matthews, and Isaiah Dent, who are younger players, big frames, higher ceilings. Thought process is that these are guys who can, down the line, help you out more. It's an interesting group, and I struggled with how I graded this. Because on one hand, you added bodies. You definitely added a lot of bodies to this room, with a mix of guys who can contribute this year and then some guys who have some high upside. And what I do think is that for the future of this O-line room, you've put guys in there that you feel better about developing into contributing players down the line than the guys you had previously. That's a big picture, long-term reason to feel good about them. And you brought in some guys who can play as well. It seemed like solid pickups. On the other, only 2 of those 8 additions that you made have starting experience. Chester and Snee. McVay was not a starter at UNC. He played quite a bit, but he was not a starter. It's only 3 of the 5, it's the 3 I just said, who had extensive playing experience. You know, nobody else got more than a few snaps. So you don't have a lot of those game reps to go off of. That's tough. And that can be concerning when you consider what you're losing in this room and what you had to do to improve this room. You know, I think in terms of the overall talent in the room, I think you probably improved, because I think big picture, you probably have more talented options. Did they improve the unit for 2026? That's the question for me. That's the part of it that's tough for me, is I don't know that they got better for 2026. And I talked about this at the start. If they had gotten Jordan Seaton, I think you could have pieced the rest together. I do. I think those guys I said alongside a Jordan Seaton, you can be fine. I'm not saying be good. I'm not saying be an offensive line you lean on. I'm saying an offensive line that can, if you have even numbers in the box in the run game, we can block it. If we're going to throw the football, we can give our quarterback more than 2 seconds to throw. That's what I'm thinking if you had gotten Jordan Seaton, but you didn't get Jordan Seaton. And you didn't get a single offensive lineman who was a true primary target in the portal, when this is a position where you probably needed to do that. Now, I have spoken nonstop about the actual quality of offensive linemen in the portal. I've done it in this episode. Guys like Seaton are rare. Most of the guys you're getting are not like that. There are guys out there, though, who you trust. He could be a starter and be a solid player. And he didn't even really get one of those guys out of the SEC. I guess Chester would be the one. And look, Alabama wanted him for what it's worth. Alabama did want DJ Chester. State had to win a battle for that guy. And I think DJ Chester would have started for Alabama next season. So it's not just a Mississippi State thing, which, I mean, I know people look at Alabama. It's like, well, they wanted Javen James. So what does that tell you about them? But State was not alone in looking at a guy like DJ Chester and thinking he can step in and be an impact guy. I think Brandon Snee, I think, can be solid. Miles McVay, you got the opportunity. He played well for UNC down the stretch last year. He'll have a chance to compete for a starting job. I think those are all decent additions. I would have liked to have seen somebody else a little bit more proven. And even if it meant we don't bring in one of these other young guys, it's fine by me. I'd have rather had somebody a little bit more proven. And, you know, where I struggle is, you know, do I think they could take a step forward? Sure. They definitely added a ton of bodies to the room. But what it came down to for me is if we came into this offseason and we told you, forget the number of offensive linemen side. If we told you State was going to bring in 2 linemen with starting experience, one from the G5, one from the SEC, and then one other guy who's played quite a bit but has not been a starter, would you have said that State did what they needed to do in the portal on offensive line? I don't think any of us would have said they did what they needed to do. And that's not to take a shot at the guys coming in, because I do think there's a chance that they're fine. But because of that, like, I've got to go C here. Like, I think it was a C job. You did address the need in the sense that you added players. In theory, you've got some high ceiling guys who can pan out, and you've got some guys who are going to step in and play, and ideally can play well. And like, I know LJ Perdome, a bunch of people have said, okay, yeah, that guy can be a dude. And maybe a Tyler Miller or a Mario Nash, maybe it does click for them. Maybe they feel good about some of the other guys coming back, taking a step forward. I don't know. But this was a spot it felt like State needed to go out and get a really proven piece along the O-line, and they didn't do that. And that's why I go C here for offensive line. So, quick, recap of the offensive positions. Quarterback, I went A. No grade for running back. I went A for receiver, B for tight end, C for offensive line. If we put that all together, average it out, it's a 3.25 on the GPA scale. So it's a B is what we're looking at, kind of B minus. I think that's probably an accurate representation there for the line overall. Sven with the comment. My problem is this. There were a lot of proven experience 2 to 3 star O-line and D-line player in the portal. For the first week, nothing happens. Signetti not prove that experience is important. Signetti's definitely, the experience is a big thing. It is weird. State did not have the action we thought they did. They went heavy after the young guys first, which is, again, a very interesting approach, which probably leads you to believe that they are not looking at this from the standpoint of trying to make sure we're fixing it for this year. And I talked about this. If you know Lebby is coming back for another year, and set that conversation, whether or not you want that happening or not, whatever. Let's just say, for sake of argument, Jeff Lebby is confident that, hey, as long as we go to a bowl game, I'm back for 2027. And I do think they could go to a bowl just with defensive improvements from Ornette, and then from, Camario full season as a starter. Can he lift you up? Could you find 6 wins, get to a bowl? I think that can. I'm not saying that should be the standard. I'm not saying you should be okay with that. Let's say that's what they're going with. And Lebby's going to come back. Well, okay, then I think you're probably okay with bringing in younger guys and hoping that you're trying to get guys who have a higher ceiling and coaching them up and developing them. Because you cannot keep going forward saying every single year we've got to add 3+ contributors from the offensive line of the portal. You can't do it. At a certain point, you've got to get to where you trust we are developing that position and got guys that can be our guys moving forward. Got to be able to do that. If you do that, then you can start being more successful in the offensive line. Now, it's tougher to do in the portal era because guys hit the portal, but that's something you've got to be able to get to. So man, I don't see 6 wins. Look, maybe I think they could get to 6. I don't know for sure. I think they could probably get to more if you get some positions to click. I'm not making a prediction for this point of this team. The non-conference slate, Minnesota's going to be very tough, but and you have to win that game to get to a bowl. But let's say you get that win, and then Auburn, Vanderbilt post the 5'9" quarterback. I understand they got the 5-star fresh coming in, but we'll see how that goes. I don't know if Auburn's going to be awesome or not. I think the offense will score points, but State will have seen that offense a lot. I don't remember everybody. Missouri, South Carolina both have a lot of questions as they're early in the season. I think State could find a path to 6 wins for what it's worth. But regardless, if you know you're going to be the guy moving forward, then I'm more okay with this idea of trying to develop the offensive line. But at the same time, if you don't fix it for this year, then if you don't fix the offensive line for this year and you're terrible again, well, all right, then what are you going to do? Are you going to be back? I believe the Kamara will be very good. Offense will be fine, but will we get hold of the sideline because everybody will run for 9,000 yards on us? I think the coaching improvement is legitimate with Arnett. I do think that makes a difference. I also think I don't think the defensive line coming back is quite as bad as a lot of people think. I'm not saying they're great. We'll talk about that here just in a sec. We're about to get there. But I think I also really like the linebackers for what it's worth. I think the defense is taking a step forward. I think the defense has a chance to take a step forward. They definitely need a couple spots to hit for what it's worth. So like I said, offensively, overall came out to like a 3.25 on it if we're going by a GPA scale. Give the offense a B. If we're going to grade State's defense, and we're going to keep that same scale, let's start with the defensive line, since that's the other spot that's questionable. This is another one where it's kind of a difficult grade because I don't think they brought in a bad group. So transfers, Jason Jenkins from FSU and Gus Cordova from USC as your defensive ends, and then D'Alen Evans as a defensive tackle from Texas A&M. Jenkins, a guy that 2 seasons ago at Tennessee kind of showed some nice flashes, showed some potential as a rotational lineman, led to him hitting the portal, goes to FSU. The thought is bigger role, going to take a step forward. Didn't happen for him. Dealt with an injury in the offseason that maybe hampered him a bit, but definitely did not have the year that he was supposed to. Back in the portal trying to find another place to go. Cordova did not play for USC as a true freshman. He might have seen a little bit of action, but didn't really register. High ceiling guy, ton of talent, ton of offers coming out of high school. Someone USC definitely wanted to hold on to, but he felt like he needed an opportunity elsewhere. And the D'Alen Evans is, in a way, kind of similar to what you would talk about with Jenkins when he was at Tennessee, and that in a crowded defensive line room has shown some flashes when as a rotational player when given opportunity. Will he take a step forward with an expanded role? And he's a player Tennessee wanted. State had to beat Tennessee to get D'Alen Evans. So they added some talented guys there along the defensive line. Cordova has a high ceiling. Evans has a high ceiling. I think Jenkins at this point, you are just banking on, can he be a solid rotational piece? I don't know if you're bringing him in to be the starter. It's not a bad group. But there is a key there that I said, which is a lot of production, a potential overproduction. And, Jenkins is what he is. Evans and Cordova are guys that you are banking on what they could be. So, because of that, it's hard for me to get super optimistic when we felt like D-line was a spot that needed to upgrade. That you wanted them to bring in a couple guys you felt he is at least competing for a starting role, but someone that's got some production and could step in and be an impact player for them along the defensive front. You wanted to get a couple of those guys. You didn't get one that's proven. And look, I don't think – I was saying this a few minutes ago. I don't think D-line's going to be a disaster for State. I think Will Whitson fully healthy, if you get him fully healthy, has a chance to be really disruptive up front and have a good season. I like Jere Bledsoe quite a bit. Calvin Dinkins can potentially – he's gotten better now, showed some nice flashes, finally healthy. Could he take another step forward and really be the guy? I think you've got some decent options along the defensive line as it is that you could end up having a solid group, and you don't have to bring in guys that are for sure starters, difference makers. I could see the guys they have already on campus taking a step forward. But it's a question. It's not a surefire thing. And that's where you felt like State needed to go out and get more. And the fact that they did not get a single guy out of the portal at defensive line that is a proven contributor, that's where, for me, I mean, I go C again here. You added guys who I think can be good. You added guys who can be contributors. You added some high ceiling guys. Do you know that you got difference makers? I don't know that. And I think it's hard to say for sure that they got that. So, yeah, that's where I got to go with a C on this. I don't think it's a complete and total failure, but it's definitely leaves some question. The other position, the kind of that hybrid spot, the Sam linebacker and Arnett's defense, that edge stand-up role, this is the one that bothers me the most. State brought in one player, Amari Williams out of Florida State, who was a two-way player for the Noles, played tight end and defensive end, split reps there. Coming to State defensive end, again, he's going to play that Sam linebacker role. Showed flashes at FSU. Felt like he could be a guy that could develop. Florida State did want him. Another player that Florida State did not want to see gone, and they felt like if he could have really stuck to, especially defensive end, had a chance to be a good contributor. The problem, though, is like this is a spot that was a major need on the roster. Both in terms of the fact that like you just haven't gotten good pass rush in multiple years now. You've not had guys who have played this role well for you particularly, but you also don't have the guys on the roster. That's the other problem here. You're bringing in a couple freshmen in Micah Nickerson, and Chris Addison is the other that's been talked about maybe playing here. All right, I don't think those guys are contributing much as freshmen. You have Tyshawn Willis, who was a high ceiling guy coming out. He didn't play at all last year. You know, can one of the guys, like a LaKendrick James, give you something? I know Darian Gillette has come up. Tyler Lockhart has come up. Like, maybe somebody stepping in. You do not have a proven option at that edge rush position. And State went after guys. State entertained Caleb Herring from Tennessee. They entertained Harvey Dyson from Tulane. And you see those guys go elsewhere. Dyson goes to NC State. Herring goes to South Carolina. And the talking point coming out of it is that those are players who had pretty high asking prices that State felt they were not quite worth. That State was not going to pay what those guys wanted when they did not think they are for sure SEC difference makers. That, you know, Dyson, you know, great production at the American Conference, but we don't know that he's doing that in the SEC. Herring showed a lot of flashes at Tennessee, was a good player, but may be more of a rotational type guy. I guess that's the thought process at both those spots. And we're not going to pay top dollar for those positions, especially because Amari Williams is someone that we believe in and we think can be awesome. And we really believe Amari Williams is going to be a difference maker for Mississippi State. Okay. Maybe Amari Williams is awesome. If he is, fantastic. Great. You hit. What if he's not? What if Amari Williams is not that dude? Then where do you turn? And again, I understand you got other guys on the roster you think can play that role. None of them have proven their ability to do that yet. And D-line, and I know this is kind of D-line, but like defensive end, defensive tackle, nose tackle, I can at least look at the guys State has with the guys they brought in, and I can see that coming together as like, okay, I could see that working out well. This is a spot where I really felt State had to get somebody who has proven they can play the role. And that's what worries me a little bit here. And, you know, Sven makes the point, edges play violent, many injuries happen. I expect at least 3 guys. Like, yeah, guys, that's a spot where you're going to rotate bodies for sure. You're not just playing one guy. So the fact they only brought in one is already concerning in and of itself. Maybe they feel really good about not just Williams, but maybe they do feel good about other guys on the roster. But why would you not want to get somebody else in here that you've seen play that role and do it well? Even if you don't think we're not fully confident that's an SEC level guy or an SEC impact difference maker. I would still feel a whole lot better having either Caleb Herring or Harvey Dyson on this roster. And clearly you had money that you could have spent, and you didn't spend it on the spot because you didn't think it was worth it, especially when at the time you're talking about going in on Jordan Seaton. Well, that didn't happen. State might be fine here. Amari Williams might be the gem that Arnett thinks he is, and then you got a couple of maybe Tyshawn Willis is ready in year two, and then they see like a Darian Gillette they think plays it well and takes like maybe State works out, they're okay. The fact you did not bring in somebody that I can confidently say can play this position well when you're not bringing anybody back. That's the other thing here. Compared to some of the other spots where I've been a little bit concerned, you at least have guys returning that you feel okay about. You can see it working. You don't bring anybody back here. It's not an F because you did bring a player in. I gave out a D. Like, to me, this was a D for State at that Sam linebacker edge rush spot. To only add one player, and it's not a guy with true proven production, and you were going solely off of potential, and also the fact that you are willingly passing on other guys who are more productive in their careers, that is bothersome to me. Especially in the case of Caleb Herring. Like, it's crazy to me that they would not want to, and maybe South Carolina had an offer that State wasn't willing, whatever. But again, I don't buy it when State was going to pay $4.5+ million to go get Jordan Seaton. I don't know what Caleb Herring got at South Carolina. Caleb Herring was productive in the SEC. We're not talking about a guy who, like, was doing it at the lower level. He was doing it in the SEC. And also, the other thing I'll say about Caleb Herring, go look at his numbers compared to the numbers Mississippi State's guys had. Caleb Herring was a backup at Tennessee. Caleb Herring had better production than any of Mississippi State's pass rushers, any of their defensive linemen. Doing it in the SEC. So why would you not go and get that guy and pay for that guy if you've seen him be better than what you've had? That's what doesn't make sense to me. Maybe they truly think they got something with Amari Williams, but it's a big risk. So yeah, I go D at that spot. And I hope I'm dead wrong, but that's the one that really concerns me, that you didn't go out and get somebody who you trust can be a difference maker for sure, has shown they can do it. On a more positive note, we'll get to the back seven because I forgot linebacker. Technically, State does bring in a player here, Gav Holman from Florida State. Didn't play for the Noles. I'm not including this as a part of the grade. I'm not going to give a grade at linebacker. But it's one guy who I think is just entirely a depth piece, and you didn't need to go out and get anybody. Had they added a linebacker who was I guess had they gone and gotten Chris Jones from USM, who there was the whole conversation, should State have done that? Then I'd give a grade and contribute it because you would have been adding a difference maker to your defense or a guy who could contribute to your defense. But they didn't have to. I'm not really worried about the linebacker room. I think you're perfectly fine there. So I'm not going to give a grade for one player when I don't think it makes much difference. I don't think it's worth either propping up or dragging down the grade one way or another. So I think they're fine at linebacker. The secondary, though, is where we're going to get very positive. Cornerback. Add Quentin Taylor from Iowa State, Caleb Singleton from Syracuse, and then Jamrock Grimsley from Florida. I think you did a great job here. You got a power conference level starter in Quentin Taylor to play opposite of opposite of Kelly Jones. You had to get somebody to do that. Singleton has some high upside, got some playing time as a freshman. Grimsley probably some high upside. I know dealt with injury a little bit at Florida, and that's probably knocked him a bit. You've added talent to the room. You've added a good starting piece to the room. I think you're in good shape at corner. It's going to be a good group for you, especially with Kelly Jones there protecting one side of the field. I think Taylor can be a serviceable option on the other side. Did what you needed to. I give it an A. You did a really good job at cornerback. I like that group. I think you did a good job at safety as well. Marcus Williams coming from Rice, Jordan Gilbert from LSU, Kendall Dolby from Oklahoma. You added 3 players who have a lot of production and a lot of experience, a lot of starting experience. That's what I needed to see at safety. You were losing a lot of experience in that room. You wanted to go in and add experience guys. Safety is a spot where experience definitely matters a little bit more because of how much it really comes down to just getting in the right place and understanding where you need to be on the field and understanding what angles to take, all that kind of stuff. So playing reps matters a ton for safety. And you got 3 guys who've done that. You've already got Isaac Smith coming back. You're bringing in Braylon Womack. I think these 3 transfers, you've got a really good group to work with. And I think you're going to have a fine safety room. I think your secondary is going to be a strength. So I give it A at safety as well. Secondary is where, if you're a State fan, you can be really excited about what you've done. I think that's the best job in the portal State did was at their secondary spots. So you got to give a lot of credit to State's coaches for that. I mean, Kiva Thompson coming in, Matt Barnes at safety, and then the corners coach as well. Just have done a really good job with the guys that they've brought in. Defensively, so if we're going to grade this out, again, I gave a C for defensive line, a D at edge rush, and then A at corner, A at safety. If you're averaging those out into a GBA scale, 2.75, that's a C. Ooh. You passed, but not by much. And look, I guess if you wanted to weigh things a little bit more, you could say the line of scrimmage stuff matters more, but you go 2.75. If you average all of this out, literally comes out exactly to a 3.0. So exactly a B, or technically a B minus for State's overall grade for the portal haul. I've got it right at a 3.0. I got it at a B. I think that's probably fair. And I kind of just said this, look, if you want to grade relative to each positional need and the impact, and you want to say that having a C at offensive line, C at defensive line, D at edge rusher is far more impactful, and therefore that pulls the grade down, you can do that. But I also don't want to overlook the fact that there was a couple spots they did a really, really nice job on. And I think that does raise the class up a little bit. I think a true just B minus is probably the spot to be. Sven gives the O-line an F. Well, hey, like I said, I'm not giving an F unless you literally didn't add anybody at all. That's how I chose to grade this. But I think you're overall looking at it was a B class for State in the portal. You still have some question marks for sure. You have question marks at very important positions, but you also added some talented pieces at a lot of skill spots. It's an interesting team to look at. And we'll be breaking more of it down pretty soon. Near future, I want to get into doing like some depth chart projections, taking a look at where we think how it's going to shake out going into. I know spring practices are still a bit of a ways away, but coming out of the portal hall, how do we see the depth chart breaking down? That's something we'll hit. I don't know if we're going to do that later in the week because obviously Thursday is more of a call-in show, so we'll. It's tough to dive deep into topics on a night like that because you never know when someone's going to come in. But we'll eventually start to look at the depth chart and continue to break down what this roster will be moving forward. Appreciate everyone who tuned in. Had a great interaction in the chat with all of you who are loyal listeners. Definitely appreciate you guys. If you haven't already, leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And yeah, we will be back with our call-in show Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central. See you all later. As always, swing your sword and hail State.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.